Coming from a developer that hasn't released a video game before, I was incredibly impressed by how ambitious Decay of Logos looked, a new action-adventure game that looks like a cross between Breath of the Wild and Dark Souls. The tale begins with the destruction of the main character's home by the Crimson Knights. In the remains of her once beautiful home, Ada finds comfort in her elk friend who joins her on her quest for resolution and retribution. As Ada travels north, she'll come across other travelers and environmental elements that write out the lore of this world. In that sense, it's a story that doesn't guide you, but rather rewards those who take their time to analyze the world. It's an exceptionally done 20-hour story that pushes you to scratch your curiosity itch and figure out the narrative for yourself. Decay of Logos is a bold indie game that bites off more than it can chew. The world is designed to be a linear adventure game complete with environmental puzzles that only hint at the objective. Ultimately, it's up to the player to figure out these puzzles through analyzation and critical thinking to figure out what the next step is. While it's not the easiest campaign to dive into, I thought it was fun when it worked. That's my general experience with Decay of Logos. Typically, I found myself exploring new areas of the world complete with monsters, puzzles, and new structures. Ada looks like a long-lost Legend of Zelda character. There's an RPG system attached to her that lets her equip armor and weapons taken from other enemies or found in treasure chests. All of these items have a durability attached to them that has weapons break the more you use them, or the armor the more you get hit. Each one of them has their own set of stats attached to them too that seem fairly balanced. What didn't seem balanced were Ada's stats and everything else around her. Decay of Logos feels unbalanced. It does go for a Dark Souls-like combat system and the challenge of that series, but it doesn't really feel challenging at all. It feels broken. The starting area is filled with monsters that easily one-hit kill you upon finding them. My initial resort was to just keep on dying and leveling up slowly until I could actually survive the first fight. That only brought more issues to my attention. Ada's leveling up system is hidden away. I got notifications that told me I got a new level and saw that my stats were going up, but I never knew how far I was from the next one. On top of my equipment wearing out, Ada herself tires out and that starts to negate her stats. If Ada goes too long without sleeping, she'll start to degrade in terms of her stats. While it was an interesting mechanic at first, it quickly became an annoyance after I realized that the decay started about 3 to 5 minutes after sleeping. Getting sleep requires you to find an outpost to restore your stats and create a new save point. That'd be fine, but Decay of Logos decides to throw in a random enemy ambush mid-sleep about 85% of the time I tried to get some sleep, just because 4 minutes had passed since my last sleep. It feels like a system that's constantly fighting itself. I can't take on enemies because they're too strong, so I train, but then I can't see how well I'm training. Even if I train, my character gets tired and becomes weaker, and if I try to get some rest, I'll get attacked by enemies. It's frustrating, not challenging. After finally being leveled up enough to stay alive in a fight, Decay of Logos starts to become more enjoyable. Enemies and bosses are fun to tackle. These fights adopt a Dark Souls-like system of slashing through enemies and parrying or dodging enemy moves. They put up a good fight, but like the games they're inspired by, you can at times outsmart the AI for an easier battle. I've had giant ogres that could kill me in 2 hits fall into holes, landing me an instant victory. Decay of Logos is a lovely looking world. This is a fantasy themed universe sprawled with ancient ruins, castles, and creatures lurking in every corner. While occasionally simple in design, these environments were magical and piqued my curiosity, encouraging me to explore and unearth the story hidden away. Like Breath of the Wild, if I saw something in the distance, I immediately want to go to it and see what was hiding. In a game that's told through environmental design, I think this completely nails the setting design. What does sadly vary is the performance depending on your platform of choice. I played on the PS4 Pro and a Nintendo Switch for this review. Performance on PS4 and Xbox One ran mostly solid with the occasional frame rate dip. These dips didn't really seem very consistent though, so it was hard to predict when or why they'd happen. Nintendo Switch on the other hand is the worst experience. This game is rough on the Switch. Playing on the go, the resolution is set at a dynamic 720p while the dock mode is set to 720p. The frame rate is oddly enough unlocked on the Switch despite mostly targeting 30 frames per second and averaging somewhere between 24 to 30 frames. In bizarre instances like when I was fighting an ambush and the world was blacked out, the frame rate would rise up to what felt somewhere around 45 to 50 frames. It felt completely jarring having these weird high frame rate moments 10% of the time and then 90% of the time it lagged on. There also seems to be a memory issue on Switch. I noticed that whenever I paused the game for too long and then resumed, gameplay would just chug completely, hitting at times 10 frames per second, even failing to load the inventory screen. It was so weird. Letting the game run without a pause for a few seconds got it to recover, but that issue just seemed so game breaking. That lag, along with controls that already felt somewhat unresponsive or slow, and this goes for all consoles, made playing a pain sometimes. If you're eager to play this, giving up performance for a portable experience isn't recommended. So much still needs to be fixed with the Switch version and some parts of the other versions. Decay of Logos doesn't feature a lot of music, if at all. I can't even remember because what did take over were the sound effects. Just how the visual design plays a big part in the story and the world building, so does the sound design. I appreciated the attention to detail in all the different environments. Exploring the forest, for example, you could hear the sounds of wildlife off in the distance. Walking near a prison cell made out of wood evoked these creaking sounds of old aging structures. What didn't work too well was how these different audio sources were mixed. For example, when talking to NPC characters, their dialogue, though well written, just didn't fit the scene. The voice acting often got overpowered by the sound of enemies around me. It was distracting and made it hard to understand what the character was even saying. Luckily, I did have subtitles turned on. Decay of Logos tried to make an indie cross between Dark Souls and Breath of the Wild while delivering this interesting narrative adventure. Sadly, it doesn't live up to those expectations. Combat is fun once you actually level up to survive a single swing 1 minute into the game. The way storytelling is told is enthralling and easy to get hooked on. It definitely got me wanting to learn more. However, everything else felt unbalanced, unfinished, and needing of polishing, especially with the Switch version. In the end, Decay of Logos is a cool idea, but leaves a lot to be desired.